Historically, trade between Africa and North America has flourished, with focus primarily on Africa's export of natural resources such as oil, gas, minerals, and agricultural products. As part of this trade, in return, Canada exports machinery, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and manufactured goods to various African nations. In recent years, there has been an increasing interest in diversifying trade and investment between Canada and African nations beyond the traditional sectors. To discuss the current state of Africa-Canada trade and investment, I'm joined by Damian MacInnis, an economic development professional and the president of Colindale Solutions. I'm also joined by Ken Oguzie, a renowned international trade, investment, and economic development professional. He's also the CEO of Africa-Canada Trade and Investment Venture, ACTIV. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madeleine.
So we'll start with Ken. Your organization has been very prominent in promoting trade and business between Canada and African nations. We've heard of the multi-million-dollar Zen Electric business deals, and there's also been some escapades in real estate. Tell us a bit about your accomplishments in bringing investment to Nova Scotia and what the experience has been like so far.
Well, I think it's been a great experience. Sometimes it gets like a roller coaster as well.
Right.
But, like every other thing, great things, you have to sort of build and then you grow upon it. I mean, thankfully, we've been able to, start seeing some of the milestones which any business will want to see. So we're really, excited, especially with the recently, signed deal between, an investment company in Nigeria, specialized in power, really, and whereby they invested in a company here in Nova Scotia, which is the first of its kind, if I must say. And of course, we couldn't do this by ourselves. We've done this with partners like, Colindale and all the other partners we've worked with. So I think it's very exciting. I think it's exciting. And I think looking at Nova Scotia as a whole, typically when you hear about investment between, Africa, the African continent and Canada, you typically think about Ontario or some of the bigger provinces. But we are here to say, we are trying to, changing that paradigm. We're shifting that paradigm, and we're really looking for ways to say, let's bring all the stakeholders together. It's possible. This region, Atlantic Canada or the Maritimes, people typically have not really seen as a major gateway for international business at that level, especially with Africa. We're looking to change all of that. So for us, it's very exciting, and I think it's been a great experience so far.
Indeed, exciting. You're basically disrupting the market and putting Nova Scotia and Eastern Canada more on the business and commerce map of Canada. That is awesome.
Absolutely.
I know that there's some gist about escapades in real estate as well. Would you like to speak to that a bit?
Yes. I think, and I can pass it to my partner Damian to sort of give that intro.
Yeah, so it all kind of came to fruition after one of our partners came from Nigeria, and he came over to visit Nova Scotia in general on opportunities and just trying to gauge the landscape of the area. And when I brought him to Cape Breton and brought him to Cabot Links and places like that, he couldn't believe the amount of development in a small area, right?
Yes.
And so Cape Breton kind of triggered something in the back of his mind. However, we're there for other opportunities. So I guess a week or two later, we had a phone call, and then the real estate game started. So we purchased some land, developed partnerships with construction companies and major Lindsay Construction, actually, a large construction company in Nova Scotia here, and they helped us develop a plan, and so we're well on our way into this development as well as other opportunities in real estate. So, yeah.
You were recently on a trade mission to Africa, specifically Nigeria.
That's right.
Tell us a bit about that, what your experience was versus what you may have had in mind before heading out to Africa.
I had some good insight from my partner here, but you never get a real feel unless you see it yourself. And that's exactly what Ken told me. He said, you have to come with me. If you want to be working with us, you have to understand the culture, the people, the country itself, and the opportunities around that. So it was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. I come from a community of 800 people, and jumping into a community of 20 million people was
Big shocker.
plus,
Lagos,
yeah, and Legos. It was interesting. You know, like it wasn't anything that I could have ever imagined, really, because of the amount of commerce and opportunities I seen.
Right.
The gap in the system was an eye-opener as well, from poverty to high net worth individuals, right?
Yes.
So that was one big thing that stood out to me. But just the generosity and the good business culture there was that really opened my eyes, knowing that this country, that we've have all these people who don't really know, in an ignorant way, not so much, just not knowing what it's really like, right? And when you really get to understand the internal workings of how to do business in Nigeria or in Africa in general, and that's why we partnered up, to tell you the truth, because Ken helps me with that, so I can pull together deals with Nova Scotia companies and Atlantic Canadian companies, and that's my background too. So we're pretty successful, I think, in our opinion, but we have lots more to go to get to where we want to be, because it's really about education right now. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Africa will see a lot more of you, Damian.
100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. So based on Damian's experience, Ken, that was amazing. But let's bring it back home now to Nova Scotia and to local. What would you say, in your experience, is the appetite of Canadians on the issue of investing in Africa or African business?
So one of my favorite ways to talk about this is, we're not where we want to be, but we're not where we used to be. So basically, I would say there's been a lot of progress, and, you know, working with partners, you know, for the last 8 years or so, around sort of sensitizing people and really showcasing the opportunities which, you know, Africa, West, East, South, and North Africa as a whole, you know, what they have, and letting people understand that the narratives is just beyond what you see on some of the mainstream media around poverty and, you know, wars and all of that. There is business, there is commerce, there is trade, there's investment, there is, you know, agriculture, all of these pieces, whereby if you have the right sort of support systems and organizations to help you hold your hands, you could actually see these opportunities. So I would say, from when we started to now, we've seen a lot of progress. We've had more stakeholders, you know, come on board. We've seen more traction. And not just, you know, across Canada, but even coming into like Nova Scotia now, you know. And right now, I don't know if you saw this, I think a couple of weeks ago or so, you know, Global Affairs Canada, they're working on a Canada-Africa strategy.
Awesome.
And they were, so they put it out there looking at, you know, telling stakeholders to say, what would you want to see in this strategy? What are some of the engagement things you want to see on the strategy? And, you know, obviously we implore people to really go in there and, you know, talk about what you want to see, because at the end of the day, if Africa wins, everybody wins, like I always like to say.
Yes.
So I think, back to the question, we've seen progress, that we could do more, but I know, like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
And I know if you look at relationships Canada like has with China, or Nova Scotia has with China in the whole lobster industry, it wasn't built in 4 years or 5 years. It took quite some time.
Yes.
It might be slow, you know, thinking about the way Nova Scotia is as a whole and all of that. But I think my message, and Damian's, has been very clear. When we want to achieve big things in Canada, it doesn't always have to start from the West or from Ontario. Why can't we start from here? We have everything, you know, we have a major port. The population is fairly enough, you know, good sized population, great location, close to New York and Boston and what have you. So why can't we leverage on it? So that's what we're doing, and I think that's what we're going to continuously do, and hopefully we can get more traction as, you know, the years progress.
We're so glad to have you in our corner in Eastern Canada for sure, because these are some amazing ideas. So increased interest. Damien, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an education piece. I keep coming back to that, and allowing people to understand that commerce and trade is quite large in the African countries,
right?
And
due
to population in general, like there's 30 some million people in Canada, compared to almost that in one country in Nigeria.
You are correct.
Right? So
Yes.
and like in one city, I mean, sorry.
Yes.
So like that alone should open some people's eyes,
Absolutely.
right? And that's just one city. Like you look right across every African country and they're very populated, and there's a lot of trade that we can take advantage of, where we can build joint ventures with companies, and that, like, that type of partnership is something that government needs to kind of jump on board with too. So that's kind of what we've been pushing really hard lately, is just trying to educate government agencies and businesses to understand the opportunity. I mean, it's endless. It really is. Yeah.
And if I might add as well,
Yeah.
you know, for those who don't know, you know, they had recently ratified the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which really sort of opens up the African market. So basically, it's going to help with ease of doing business across Africa, eliminating some of the barriers which have been there historically.
Right.
So what that means is for countries like Canada, it makes life easier. So if you want to sort of traverse through markets in Africa, because of the whole synergy which this new agreement will bring in, it makes life easy for everyone. And that also opens up opportunity for African countries to sort of work together in tandem, and then also export their products globally. So it's a game changer. And, you know, we typically talk to stakeholders about the fact that, listen, with this new agreement, Africa now becomes the largest continent in terms of free trade agreements.
Yes.
So that's huge, that's major. And we're really pushing for most of the media outlets to promote these messages, because we don't get that level of promotion which we think we deserve, right?
Right.
So working with partners like Colindale and all the other partners we had both on the continent and of course in Canada, this is the messaging, keeping it strong and realizing that this is really important. Apart from that, there's a lot of free, you know, foreign investment promotion, you know, sort of agreements that are ongoing as well. And we're sort of calling most of the stakeholders, even like Canada, to sort of, you know, sort of increase the pace around ratifying some of them. For example, the one in Nigeria is not 100% complete. And, you know, whenever we've had the opportunity, we've had to ask decision makers that we need to move fast on this, because if you also want investment to happen in those continents, you need to give sort of security, you know, de-risking some of these investments. So the messaging is clear. There's a lot to be done, but there's a lot of stuff coming up on the continent and more. So it's kind of exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, the right time to jump on. So rising interest, and it looks like the government of Canada is paying attention, beginning to take notice. So that's awesome. So, gentlemen, in terms of the African presence in Canada, the African diaspora is huge in Canada. What would you say is the role, if any, that African diaspora has to play in the future of trade?
Well, I can always speak about that first, and then I'll probably let Damian have his perspective. Well, of course, I'm a member of the African diaspora, even though I consider myself a global citizen as well. But I think we know the role of the African diaspora. If you think about how much remittances contribute in terms of development on the continent, but not just financial remittance, but even social remittance around the culture piece, because there's a lot of export of culture, right, as well from here, which most people don't think about. But I think that helps as well, because when you think about the cultural differences that sometimes affects business from two continents, the more people understand cultures on both sides, then it's longer term, it works out best for everyone. But that's another topic. But I think coming back to trade as a whole, I think the diaspora is very key. We have a lot of educated people, educated Africans all across the world. And if we bring it to Canada, Canada has been very great in terms of, you know, bringing talents, top talents. Now, brain drain is another discussion, but I think we call it brain gain these days, because the most important thing is if those individuals leave Africa and come this way and then turn around and get to contribute to Africa in terms of their skills, in terms of their knowledge, in terms of the exposure. And the same thing happens with trade, because we do have a lot of Africans in diaspora, like in Canada, setting up businesses. And some of these businesses go on to have like a subsidiary in Africa, build partners with their home country, even become global ambassadors. promoting Africa while living in Canada.
Yes.
So the diaspora is a huge chunk, and I think there's not been enough done in terms of harnessing that opportunity, in terms of harnessing their positioning, in terms of harnessing their unique strength, which they have as individuals who have lived in both sides and can see both sides of the coins, understand both sides of the world, right?
Yes.
So I can't overestimate that importance. And Damian has met a lot of diaspora members, and I think he can speak about his experiences as well.
Most definitely. Like, I can't speak. I didn't have a clue how big it actually was in Canada, to tell you the truth. I mean, like, just being introduced by Ken to a number of prominent people throughout the country that I would have never have thought of meeting really in the past. But the educational piece is so massive. Like, there's just our recent conversations with the community college here in Nova Scotia. Over 70% of the international students come from Nigeria. Something I would never have known, right? So, but that alone shows you that there's a lot of people being educated, and on a high end too. Like, they're not just passing school; they're on the higher end of the educational system, and they're spread across Canada. It's not just Nova Scotia. It's like Brampton, Ontario, and other areas right across Alberta. You know, but you know, bringing those people together is going to be paramount to make this happen. So this opportunity to speak to you is going to help us with that. So I really appreciate it.
For sure. So well utilized, this is the African diaspora becomes a very efficient bridge
100%.
in connecting both regions in terms of commerce and culture and everything else that you've spoken to. Fascinating. Fascinating.
Absolutely.
I do have one more question. You have actually spoken to it, but just if you wanted to shed some more light on really the future of Africa-Canada trade. Where do you see things in a decade or two, maybe 3, 4 ahead?
I'll start there. Yeah.
Yes.
Our goal is to really just, in the next year or two here, really start pushing the educational side, getting people to understand opportunities, but also that joint venture piece is a good start, right? It's not a big risk. It's the opportunity to partner with other companies in Nigeria, or Nigerian companies partnering with Atlantic Canadian companies.
Right.
And then we find that cohesion for that, you know, then it'll organically happen as well. Like those organic conversations and word of mouth is going to be key for other businesses to say, oh yeah, I'm working in Africa or in Nigeria or Ghana or wherever throughout in South America. South Africa is another big area that people are looking at. Sure. So I mean, these areas. That's what we need. We need more businesses to talk about it more, right? And even though people want to hold on to the little nest egg, we want to kind of break that a bit and talk about the opportunities being missed.
So Ken, in your own crystal ball, what did the predictions look like?
Well, I think from our own business, like, you know, looking at what we do, I think we envisage we'll see a bit more interest because obviously we have a lot of trade missions and some of these events all lined up, which is geared towards education and really exposing people to some of the ways they can work together. And we're saying, like, even if you're not really like a Canadian business and you don't want to do business directly in Africa, there's joint ventures. You could work with partners, and we could support you in terms of creating those credible partners and, you know, bridging the whole thing, de-risking whatever thing you're doing. So that's one piece around us. But overall, thinking about where the world is going with the whole tech space, I just got back not too long ago from Toronto with the Collision conference, you know, which is which is the largest IT conference in the whole of North America.
Right.
And there were probably like 100 businesses from the continent in attendance.
Wow.
And these guys are doing massive things. They're doing great, groundbreaking technology. So tech is a big space. And
sure.
Tech and international trade is becoming big, because when you look at things like what the city of Brampton is doing, whereby they're hosting a lot of international companies to come set up in Brampton, a lot of them from Nigeria, other countries as well. So from a prediction standpoint, I think tech is going to be big, because, you know, when you compare tech to like tangible materials, there's some of the bottlenecks that you don't have in tech.
Right.
Like they say, you only need internet and power, whatever,
Yes.
and the computer, and then
And
whatever,
you're in.
all the magic happens. So I think that borderless type of transaction will grow. And we are definitely, we're keeping an eye on that. We're doing a lot in the tech space as well, working with stakeholders as well. Because think about Africa, youngest population in the world, a lot of them are very IT savvy, and there are tons of problems to solve. And those problems, that's how you breed innovation and creativity. And the good thing about it, like I've been telling Canada, over time you realize there are a lot of problems that can be solved in Canada by African entrepreneurs. And that's a change in the narrative, because most times people think about it one-sided. But wait, there's a flip. Because when you have tons of problems to be solved, that's how innovation, that's when people have those light bulb moments.
Right.
And that's what I foresee, that's what I envisage happening. You know, it could be 5-10 years, but you know, stay tuned. That's what I would say.
So generally the future is bright, and there's no time like the present to jump on.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, I've been talking to Ken Oguzie, a renowned international trade, investment, and economic development professional, and the CEO of Africa-Canada Trade and Investment Venture ACTIV. And we've also been speaking to Damian MacInnis, an economic development professional and the president of Colindale Solutions. Join us on this channel for more conversations like this. Don't forget to subscribe. See you soon on Community Updates.